So I wanted to walk through a variety of ACL functions and thought that it would be useful to first go through the slides associated with them and talk you through, what each item means, but then also to show you an example where, you basically can define data fields over and over again using this approach. As we conclude the presentation today, later on, we will talk about how, a lot of what I'm trying to teach you is around getting this to a more automated process so that you can do it over and over again, and hence getting more to the fixed length file format. And again, I'm glad to hear everyone's using that today. Looking at the different functions, ltrim is more of a left trim, and it will move data over to the left, and we'll show that. All trim is trimming data for purposes of basically trimming the left and right of the data point. The sub function, it works similar to the mid function in Excel, and the sub function is something where you're able to you can do a couple of good things with it. Not only can you cut out a middle point of a field, but you can also fix a data field because, as we'll show you, and again, a bit of a best practice in my opinion, is come up with a data fixed data length that you want to go with that particular field. For example, invoice number, let's just go with 25. It may not be enough. We need to kind of look at the data and see, but for the most part, if we can kind of come to what is the longest length, we can then automate that better. So the Ctod is changing a character to a date. So it's taking a character-based field and turning it into a date. The value field is essentially turning a character field into a numeric. It requires decimal places as well. The remove and include functions are used to essentially include everything that's put within the function. So if I say include within, let's say the supplier name, I want to include every character and number, or every letter and number, I can do that. But if I don't want to include punctuation, I would leave that out of the list of the remove and include, and then it will run properly. The exclude works exactly the opposite to include, where you can say, I just want to exclude numbers. I just want to exclude letters and punctuation, etc. I do find include works a little easier. I'll show you why when we show it to you, but that's why I use include more. But it doesn't mean exclude isn't valuable and useful. I sometimes find certain punctuation is annoying, such as quotation marks. And for those instances, the exclude, and within a field that's already been defined, you can exclude, say, those quotation marks. That can be useful as well. Replace works like find and replace if you needed that. I don't tend to use that very much. I'm not usually changing data, but at the same time, there are times where you want to change over to, say, like a new company code type or account type or something, and going to like a new naming convention, and hence, if it was one thing, change it to another thing. I guess I can see why that would be useful. The string, val, character field, etc., etc. This almost works better in an example, so I think I'd rather show the last two as examples. But what they're trying to do is to basically get rid, in the top one there, the string, val, character field. What we're trying to do there is pull out the leading zeros in numbers, whereas the sub, etc., is a pretty long-winded way of automatically splitting your tab-delimited fields, and we'll show you that coming up here in a second. And let me just get to ACL. Bear with me 1 minute. So going back to this paid file, and we're back at the edit table layout. some of the things that you might want to do, and let's kind of go up to the top here, look at that check number. Check number is now right formatted, which I don't like. I'd rather it be left formatted. So I'm wondering, kind of how best to do that. And one of the things that I try to do at this point is to use the ltrim or all trim function. So let's kind of call this ltrim check none. And in the default value, we'll click on the FX button. And I mean, you could select it from over here. I'm just going to type it ltrim, and then you're going to bring in the check number. And notice now in the start here that the ltrim check number is, 12 in length. I think that is based upon the fact that the original field was 12 in length, so it kind of based it on that. But it's calculated. It's basically 0 right now. So let me close this screen. Now we have the check number that's kind of in the middle there, right? It's sort of hanging out there. And then we have the ltrim check number, which is left trimmed. So now it's been kind of moved to the left. I find for joining tables, I think joining tables and doing other summarizations, it's kind of dangerous to have blank spaces to the left. I find that any sort of summary that you do, if you have 6481 shift over by one character, now you have it as kind of like a new number off on its own and in sort of on its own spectrum there in the summary, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'd rather have everything be left trimmed, and we'll continue on here, I guess. Hold on. So just, I mean, showing you some of the functionality, that may be useful. We may want to do an all trim, and all trim is sort of tough to see. It really kind of looks the same when you look at the data. But now, bear with me, the all trim can be added. And the all trim function actually has no blank spaces over here and no blank spaces over on the left-hand side as well. So it's done a complete trimming of it. What is still a little bit odd is that ACL still does see check spaces there when you're doing filters and things like that, but it's very rare that you're ever doing that kind of thing. So for the most part, the left trimming of this or all trimming can be interchanged. I tend to use all trim because it's just a much cleaner option. It's trimming it from both sides of the equation. Now, one thing, and I don't think I have an example, but wish I did, and I'll try to find an example as I go through this, but I don't think I'll be able to. Maybe in the zip code. I wanted to show you how to get rid of leading zeros, and it looks like all of my data does not have leading zeros in it anyway, so I will have to kind of discuss that one through with you as opposed to create it. But one of the other data functions that I use quite a bit is the include or remove. I used to use remove quite a bit, so you'll see in my books and texts that I use remove all the time. But for the most part, I do find that using the text field include is also the new one that replaced remove, but remove still works. It's just include also works now. So I'm going to include in the vendor name, or actually, excuse me, the vendor address, the numbers. So we're just going to include the numbers in the vendor address. I can take the vendor address field, which is here, and back here, I can, give me 1 minute here, I can basically say remove, vendor address, and now put a comma, and in quotation marks, have 0 through 9. And then close the parentheses, close quotation marks. What that's going to do is remove everything within vendor address except for the 0, 1 through 9. But I am going to use include because that's the newer version and what we should use. And bear with me 1 minute here. I just have to change an option in my data. Bear with me 1 second here. I had an option that most people would never change, so I had it changed. And I need to just now fix this back. So yeah, now again we'll have a comma, quotation marks closed. Okay. So now that I go back to the vendor address field, actually I'll just add it to the left here because it's simpler. One thing, again, we can select vendor address, sorry, the original version. And then up top here, I just want to include the vendor address numbers. So it's just include vendor address numbers. And notice how now the include or remove function has removed everything except for the numbers in this case, because that's the only thing that I put within that function. Now I'm going to change this to now be exclude instead of include. So exclude. And we're going to do the same thing, vendor address 0, 1 through 9, but it's exclude now instead of include. And just to show you the opposite effect, for some reason, oh, right, there it is. So now it's removed everything except the numbers. Just notice here, I believe there's like a space there. A lot of times what I'll do whenever I use, bear with me 1 second, whenever I use a remove function or exclude function, I like to put exclude spaces in there as well, and that's one way. Another way, and just just as easy, and I usually do it this way, is I'll put all trim, and again all trim, and this is a multiple function, right? It's going to do the exclude function first. And then after the exclude function, it's going to do an all trim of that final value. And I don't know if you can see the effect here, but it should, everything now is lined up. Again, I think there were a couple there that there was like a space or so, whereas others did not have it. Everything will now be left aligned. Now, the value function, if for some reason I wanted to make a check number into a value, don't know, there's really no value for this, but maybe a better way to show this would be to go to an invoice amount field, and this kind of goes to defining overlapping fields and how this could be useful. Notice check amount, print version, 2 decimals, starts at 28, goes for a length of 12. If you want to make it look a little nicer, you can select some options down below in the formatting, and we can hit the close button. Notice it started at 28 and it went for 12, and in this case, so I just selected here, dragged over. This is how you would define a fixed length file. If you brought it into ACL, you would click and drag over, and then what we're going to do in the ASCII formatting is to put check amount ASCII. So if for some reason you brought in your check amount as an ASCII field, so it's now text-based field, what you could do to convert that is use the value function. And we're going to calculate that based on the value. And again, you have the check amount field here at 28, check amount ASCII starting at 28 as well. We're going to put a comma, and in case I'll put 2 decimals because there are 2 decimal places, and we need to kind of keep that pure. So in closing that out, hopefully I'll prove myself right here. The check amount field as well as the check amount calc field should total to the same value. So that's that. Now, there are other complex functions that can be used, and I wanted to talk through a split function with you as well as the sub function. And I think, but actually before that, what I should do is just quickly show you the Ctod function. The Ctod function, whoops, if for example, you do have a date field, such as expected pay date, set as an ASCII or character-based field, that ASCII or character-based field would be something that you can convert using the Ctod function. So Ctod would allow you to expected pay, and I'm just going to bring in the Ct. And we're bringing an expected pay date of the Ctod function. We're going to put a comma, and again, we're following the same format as the data is, in the file itself. I'm quite sure, and then closing that out, and adding that new column. Again, in the start item, we can just sort from high to low, and that will bring through the new field. That is now, the same as the expected pay date on the other side. So another function that could be useful for you is the split function. And the split function, is the sub function. The sub function works more like a mid function. But it also has another interesting kind of attribute, and I want to show you this. So let's say you had this all trim check number. I'm going to now call this 20. And let's just say, for example, that you had another data file, such as you had your Oracle system and your JDE system, and you wanted to combine the data from the two together. A nice way to do that is to kind of get all the data fields lined up and also have the data fields be of the same length so that you can kind of put them together. And in doing that, the sub function can be added to a function like this one, where it's 12, and we can kind of put a sub, all of this, all trim check number, comma. We're going to start at the first position of the check number, and we're going to continue for a length of 20. So, and do I have that as all trim, or, yeah, it's all trim, sorry. So all trim check number, 20. And now notice the length has turned to 20. So this is a useful way that a lot of people will fix the length of their delimited files if they get them into ACL. Again, it's not as much of a concern for anyone getting kind of fixed length files as much, but it can still be a very useful tool. I wanted to show one other function to you that may be useful in ACL. It depends, the nature of data that you're getting. But I'm going to take a different approach here in defining one of the tables. And in doing so, we're going to take this paid file copy. But this time through, I'm basically going to say that it's an other file format. I'm going to kind of tell ACL Wizard, don't work, don't do anything. And I'm going to say skip to finish. And I'm going to go to the finish line. So it's going to basically bring me to this fixed length file. Or it's not a fixed length file, excuse me. It's a tab delimited file, but it looks like a fixed length file. This is a pretty, an interesting trick if you haven't used it. But one of the things you could do is you could automatically split things within ACL, or split the columns using a function as opposed to using the wizard. And in showing this, you first want to look at the record length of the file. So in this case, it's 334. By the way, and just adding this new expression. Whoops. So we're going to now add a new data field, so we can click on the Add a New Data Field option, and we're going to put in full record. We're going to make it ASCII. It starts at 1, and it goes for 334. So now that I have that full record, I'm going to add a function to that, and I'm going to call it check number once again. it will, I guess, maybe we call it split, check number split. So in this case, we're going to take that full record field, but we're going to start it off with the split function, full record, comma, and then this is a little interesting, but you have to type in character 9, like that, character 9, comma, 1. And by doing so, what ACL is doing is character 9, it's sort of something you have to look up, but character 9 is a tab. And we actually have this in the slides, so you'll have it for later, but that kind of denotes a tab. And even though you have this full record defined, and then I have this check number split that now ACL has kind of defined it as 334. So what we can do, let's go back in. Using what we learned, we can add all trim to this and conclude with a sub as well, starting at 1 and going for 20. And what's that's telling you is that this field width is now, not appropriate and it's been changed. Kind of like to go in there and just, edit that a bit and kind of make it a little bit bigger than 1. But now that we have that, let's close out this full record column, and you'll now notice that the check number split is a field of 20 that has been all trimmed and split out of that full record. You can do that for the second field, the third field, the fourth field using that split function. The only difference is in the split, the end of it would be a 2. So in this case, when you're using the split function of that full record, character 9, in this case tab, it could be quotation marks or commas or whatever, and then instead of 1 you might have 2 or 3 or whatever, depending on the field that you're trying to isolate. So we've gone through all of these functions, and I also wanted to show you the split. Again, tab, line feed, character return, these are the ones that you would use if you wanted to kind of split things at those marks. I also wanted to kind of note, and it's really cryptic to be able to see this, so I kind of show it down here. If I'm getting this right, if you're looking for double quotes, comma, double quotes, or if you're looking for a comma, or if you're looking for double quotes, you have to surround that with single quotes. So if you're ever kind of looking for a double quote, I wanted to note you should surround it with single quotes. I don't believe ACL handles when you put 4 double quotes in a row. And I could be wrong about that, but that's what I've noted. So I wanted to kind of somehow depict that for people to be able to utilize.